to Dr. George Baum.
I'm going to let you in on a secret. Jessica's told you a bunch of things that you need to know that aren't secrets, but the big secret is going to be this thing about REACH. Now, it's not a very exciting secret, other than the fact that this could destroy Medicare as it stands right now. And so I wonder if it's still, yeah, I think my hand was over the end. All right, we're good. So this is something that likely you haven't heard about, nor have most members of Congress. It's very interesting. So as painlessly as possible and as briefly describe to you what the issue is and then what you can do about it. It indeed is a real threat to the future of Medicare. So direct contracting and this REACH, you can read that closing acronym for it, come from a subsection of the Health and Human Services. Now, for a little background, Health and Human Services is a cabinet level department that's headed by Javier Becerra, who used to be a congressman from California who was a co-sponsor of Medicare for All bills. So you expect that when a guy like that comes in, he's going to make everything right. But for reasons that we can only attribute to maybe influential campaign donations, the Biden administration and his agency administrators have not put the kibosh on what we think is this very devious kind of plan. So within the Health and Human Services, that's where you have Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and all sorts of other kind of little things about helping FDA, NIH, that's all comes under HCJ. And then you have this thing called the CMMI, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. That came out of Obama, the Affordable Care Act. And it was a brilliant idea. It's like, let's create an agency to kind of come up with new ways to do things, to improve healthcare and save money. Great, right? So they had different pilot programs. And the way it's written is that if it's working, they can scale these things up, and it doesn't have to go before Congress. For better or worse. So that's where this issue came from. So this began in the latter days of the Trump administration. Big surprise. And I could go into all sorts of detail about how a former roommate of Jared Kushner, who was in charge of the organization, of CMMI, when this kind of came out. So they came up with this idea that rather than Medicare kind of paying the doctors, we're going to have middlemen to kind of manage the care. And those are called direct contracting entities. And they were supposed to make things better by managing care. Now, managed care is something that's been around since the 70s. If you've heard of HMO, that's managed care. That's kind of where you give them a certain amount of money per month, and they're taking care of all your healthcare issues. Sounds like a wonderful idea, rather than leaving it to us to go to the doctor when we think we need to, right? It turns out there's no evidence over the past 30 or 40 years that any of these managed care programs have made more than a drop in the bucket of cost savings, and they have not demonstrated any improvement in healthcare outcomes. And the administration that's involved in this kind of negates any kind of minor improvement that they might have in cost. So, in our opinion, managed care is a colossal failure. Right? It's got a lot of money behind it, right? Because all these for-profit insurance companies are benefiting. So the concept of managed care, Medicare Advantage is managed care. And so now we've got this new program called direct contracting. And this is just, as I said, that's the old way of doing things, and this new way is to kind of put a middleman who's going to always kind of get a little bite. So the current direct contracting program is going to run through the end of this year, and there are 99 entities, little companies. Some of them are insurance companies, some of them are Wall Street investment firms that are doing this. The word got out to PNHP and National Nurses United and Public Citizen and several other organizations in the country that got alarmed. And so we all started calling our congressional representatives and protesting and writing letters and all of that. And so there was an announcement 4, 5, 6 weeks ago or something. And we were all excited that they're going to stop this, right? Because we pointed out that it's a bad thing. The announcement was, we're going to stop the DCE program at the end of the year. We're going to replace it with something called REACH. And REACH, you saw that acronym, it has to do with equity and in poor communities, and it's all this lip service to how that's going to be done. But fundamentally, if you look at the details, and it's those 99-page documents that the government produces, it's basically old wine and new bottles. It's fundamentally the same program with a little window dressing here and there. The bottom line is it still pays middlemen to, quote, manage care and make more profit in the meantime. So this new REACH program is going to begin the day after the old DC program ends. And as I said, almost any country, any kind of company can organize. The Caldwell Presbyterian Church could probably become a REACH company if it wanted to. And these applicants, fill out a form, and there's no congressional approval that is required. So there's three ways that a company sees it can make money by this. One is by maximizing the revenue, which we'll talk about. The second is to minimize how much you spend on patient care, right? And the third is to grow your volume. So in terms of how they do that, there's a phenomenon that most of you are probably not familiar with called upcoding. If you go to a doctor, you kind of have COVID, let's say, and you're coughing and a little sick. Well, he will give you a diagnosis depending on whether you're in the hospital on a ventilator or whether you're just kind of feeling a little fluish. So it's kind of in the doctor's purview to kind of say, okay, is this person suffering from COVID a 1 or a 5? And obviously, you can't be a 5 if you're not in the hospital on a ventilator, but maybe you kind of cough 3 times a day instead of once or something. So that makes it a 2 instead of 1. So that's called upcoding. It's kind of boosting kind of the severity of your illness. If you've been to a doctor lately, you may have gone in for something fairly straightforward and spent the usual 5 to 7 to 8 minutes with them. And if you got your insurance explanation of benefits, there's a good likelihood it comes as a level 4 extremely comprehensive visit. And you don't pay any attention to that because your insurance is paying that. But making that upcoding, making it look more serious than it was, means more revenue. So the way that these companies do this is I think, borderline criminal. On the left is somebody who's the average 76-year-old woman, and so you get a 0.45 for being 76. And then you see you got a little diabetes, and got a little congestive heart failure, and a couple of other things. So their score comes in at that 1.03, and that means Medicare will give these rich people $9,000. Suppose that the doctor who looked at this patient's chart, and in a lot of cases it's a computer that looks at the patient's chart, suppose they're feeling a little bit generous or lax, and they say, well, instead of just being a little bit obese, this person is morbidly obese. Morbidly obese, I don't think there's a real number, for each height and weight that kind of says when you're morbidly obese. It's almost a judgment. And that certainly gives you a little higher score. If you got diabetes, almost everybody with diabetes, if you look hard enough in the back of their eye, if they've had diabetes for several years, you can see some changes to the blood vessels. Most of those people, they don't know it, it doesn't bother them, they get by. But if somebody says, oh, they've got these changes to the retinopathy, that boosts their number. And they say, when the first doctor saw him, the patient wasn't depressed, but if the person or computer that looked at the medical record saw that, well, 10 years ago, this person, kind of got divorced or, had a flare up or something and was depressed for a while. Suddenly, that goes on this ranking. And you go through the whole thing and you upcode kind of where you can, that you think you can kind of get away with. And suddenly, look what happens. You describe the patient who, by some scheme, is predicted to require $32,000 worth of care in a year rather than $9. That doesn't mean they're going to get that much care. This is all in anticipation. It's not after the fact. So this REACH entity company would upcode and suddenly get $32,000 instead of $9. And who knows how much you're going to spend on that patient over a year? Probably not $32,000. So upcoding is, as I said, kind of a borderline criminal, clearly unethical way that these companies can convince Medicare, you need to give us more money to take care of these people because they're sick. So once they've got that money, they want to minimize the amount that they spend, obviously. And in the process of kind of telling a group of physicians that there's money to be made if you withhold care, that's an incentive, it's an invitation to say, well, maybe you don't really need to be in the hospital, just take this oxygen thing home and maybe that'll get you over your COVID, or maybe you don't need this operation after all. So it's an incentive for physicians to restrict care that has never really been present before. And clearly it's looking at the end of the year bottom line for the physicians. So that's, you don't want to, obviously there's always an issue, even with fee for service, with money in medical care. But once the physicians are incentivized to minimize care in order to make more money, that's a dynamic that really kind of hadn't been very powerful in healthcare. So the next thing is, how do you increase your volume? Well, obviously everybody's seen Joe and what's it, Jimmy Walker, on TV trying to push these Medicare Advantage plans. That's always, as I said, it's another form of managed care, middlemen. And every Medicare person gets these summary notices, and you see down at the bottom right, it's the name of the physicians. The way these REACH programs get people in is not by sending you a letter and say, would you like to go from regular Medicare to a REACH program? They recruit doctors. And they don't come to individual doctors and ask them, they go to the doctors' organizations. So there's a huge medical clinic at Novant and Atrium and God knows all over the place. And so we'll go to the people that run those and say, this is a wonderful program, and we think we can make more money for you at the end of the year, and all you have to do is sign here and we'll take care of things. But suddenly, if your doctor is in a group that has decided to go with this REACH program, you're in the REACH program. You don't even know it. You will get perhaps another one of these notices, and you see up there is required notice, no action needed. Well, when everybody gets that, what do? You go right in the ground file, right? And so this might explain all sorts of bureaucraties about what the REACH program is, and it'll talk about how your doctor has joined this because it's going to allow us to manage your care and to do things better and make everything more wonderful. I mean, it sounds good on the surface, but the bottom line is it's not. So the patient will only know if they read through the details of that. And if they say, well, I don't like that, and I want to get out, the only way to get out is by changing your doctor. And most people who have long-established relationships with their primary care providers, that'd be anathema. The last thing you want to do is go find a new doctor, particularly if you live in a rural area that's relatively underserved. And so, you almost have this catch-22 here where patients are not advised that they're getting moved into this, and then when they are, there's kind of no way out. So that's the sinister, kind of devious aspect to this whole DCE REACH program that we fear is such a threat to traditional Medicare. So it certainly threatens Medicare solvency. You probably read periodically that the Medicare trust fund is about to run out in 4 years or something like that. Well, I don't think Congress would allow that to happen. But the bottom line is that another couple of figures. Medicare on average spends about 2% on administrative overhead. They don't have to advertise, they don't have to have salesmen, it just gets the bills and pays them, and takes care of business. Medicare Advantage, that's 7 to 8 to 9% because of Joe Namath, right? So they have a lot more overhead for their profit making. A regular for-profit insurance company, Anthem, Blue Cross, Cigna, their overhead used to be upwards of around 20%. So only about 80 cents out of every dollar in your premium was going to healthcare. Part of the Affordable Care Act was to limit them to 15%. So they're being kind of forced to spend 85 cents out of every dollar. But that term is called a medical loss ratio. So from a businessman's standpoint, it's what are our losses? Well, that's the money spent on healthcare. So they're required to only have a maximum of 15% overhead. And we're looking at Medicare, traditional Medicare, with a 2 to 3%, so a little different. Now enter REACH, and this is where it really gets wonky and complicated, and I wouldn't suggest that you try to dig into this, but the bottom line is, through all sorts of little quirky channels in the REACH system, it's possible that they could have a medical loss ratio as low as 60% and keep 40% for overhead, profit, kind of whatever. Now, it's highly unlikely that we'll do that. That alert red flags. But what that tells you is that with that leeway in there, it's probably going to be closer to 20% than it is to 2%. And so, this looks like a horrifically wasteful program. And that's what attracts Wall Street firms to it. I mean, there have been all sorts of information in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes about these. But not so much to alert the general public as to what's kind of stealthily going on here. So not only is this a program that's potentially taken an extraordinary amount of profit and overhead out of the healthcare dollar, but there's also a goal to expand this up in the decade. And like I say, nobody knows about it, that can happen. And then nobody would be on regular Medicare anymore, and suddenly we'd have the whole Medicare system privatized. And the likelihood that anybody would then say, well, let's do Medicare for all, is just not going to be on the table anymore. So that's our big concern. This poses an existential threat to traditional Medicare and potentially dashes all hopes of ever having universal Medicare for all in the country. So that's why we're taking it seriously. It's kind of boring and wonky as it is. It's getting more attention now. There's several articles. This one just kind of came out of this online magazine a week or so ago. So what do we do about it? And unfortunately, Congress can't just kind of pass a law to end this because, as we explained, this is one of these pilot programs in this subcategory of the Health and Human Services Department. It is totally up to Biden, Javier Becerra, head of HHS, or the lady who currently runs this Medicare Innovation Center. They don't seem interested in stopping this. And again, it's not because they're bad people. Maybe they really think this could show some improvement. But that flies in the face of the 30, 40 years of not showing any improvement with managed care. So why, that definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So what can we do? Since we can't depend on the present administration to do this on their own, we have to exert some pressure. And we have a petition from our parent organization, PNHP. They just built this brand new website that they revealed last week, protectmedicare.net. You can see that often. Please go to it. It tells you all the information you need. On there, with a click of a button, you can sign a petition. There's probably 13,000, 14,000 people who've signed it already. Wouldn't it be great if we had 1 million or so? So you can put your name, doesn't cost anything, won't put you on any kind of mailing list, just sign the petition. Obviously, you can write a letter to the editor, and if you go to protectmedicare.net, it'll have some tips for how to do that. But everything you need to know about this is on that brand new website created by PNHP, our parent group. The next thing is to appeal to you, Congressperson. Thankfully, Congresswoman Adams has signed this letter that I said, encouraging Secretary Becerra to stop this. But it doesn't hurt to keep reminding them, to ask them to please keep the pressure on. Talk to their colleagues. You have to get more people in Congress to put some pressure on Health and Human Services to stop this. And then obviously you can join our organization to support it. I want to say that you have these yellow forms when you're taking one. You're not a member of healthcare justice already. You fill that out. The problem is, we might not be able to read your handwriting. That happens. And so I have a laptop over here, so if you want to join, you can sit down and in 4 seconds, just put your name and email and what town you live in, and hit the button and that joins you. So if you don't want to fill out the form, please do that, and then we'll be sure to get your name and email address right. So that's what you can do as individuals. Well, how about organizations? And chances are all of y'all are members of some sort of club, whether it's a Sunday school group or a Lions Club or Rotary or anything like that. There's an organizational letter against the ACO REACH thing, also in that same protectmedicare.net website. And share this information with all your members. Just get the ripple effect and get more and more people to do all this. So there again is the resource that I hope you use. And just to recapitulate, here's some more general activist resources, which Jessica mentioned. Our organization at the top, PNHP, REACH, is a great book that came out just this past year, Medicare for All Citizens Guide. Most of us who talk about Medicare for All love to show graphs, as Dr. Sachs did, because they're such visuals of these horrific situations, how much we spend, and mother die, and all of that. This book does not have one graph in it, but it conveys the information as lucidly and clearly and readably as I've ever seen it. So this is about two PhD members, one of whom ran for Congress a few years ago, so they've seen all aspects of this issue. This is a great book. I'd be happy to lend you mine, or you can get it online for about $10, or probably get it out of the library for a bar. But if you have any questions about Medicare for All, it's a wonderful resource. And then, as Jessica mentioned, we are affiliated and support the Corbett campaign, the Coalition for Truth and Reconciliation, to address the racial inequities in development. So, I hope that wasn't too numbing. And I hope that you will join us in